Thank you very much. Welcome, each and everyone. Welcome to our viewers. Greetings to our viewers. We are back as the ANC Western Cape podcast channel. And with us this evening, we have Comrade Dr. Blade Nzimande, a leader of our movement, the Minister of Higher Education and Science and Technology. Is also the former General Secretary of the South African Communist Party. And Comrade Blade, my understanding is that you are currently also the national chairperson of the South African Communist Party, our alliance partner as the ANC. Comrade Blade is known very well to our people here in the Western Cape. Now, this year marks the 30 years of our democracy. And the milestone warrants celebration, but also necessitates us to critically reflect on how far we have come as a nation. Now, just as it was central during the fight against apartheid, education continues to feature prominently in our national discourse about the development of South Africa and the extension of opportunities to our youth. Now, for the better part of his activist life, Comrade Minister Blade Nzimande has been central in the struggle against Bantu education. And after 1994, Comrade Blade played a key role in shaping South Africa's education policy, even before assuming the role of Minister of Higher Education. And this led, obviously, to him assuming this particular role. Now, as we begin the conversation, I think the first question, Comrade Blade, is, after 1994, as we've indicated in the introduction, you have been involved intimately in shaping our country's post-school education and training sector. What was your exact role, and what would you say were some of the high moments or specific contributions that you have made?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Comrade Khalid. Thanks for inviting me. And also let me congratulate the ANC in the Western Cape for creating this important platform for us to engage and debate issues and all that. First of all, let me just say that my struggle against Bantu education, the struggle for educational transformation, my own participation in it started in the 1980s, at the height of the mass struggles against the apartheid regime. I was drawn into these struggles mainly as myself a former academic at the time, having been a student activist in the 1970s. Being drawn into education policy development in the 1980s, where we were doing research, producing policies that were our vision for an alternative and a better system of education rather than the old Bantu education. From the mid-1980s, in fact, we were involved in debating the issue of how do we work towards building a university system, for example, that is integrated. Remember, by the way, in 1994, we inherited separate universities. The universities for white Afrikaners, there were universities for white English-speaking South Africans, and then there were universities for different ethnic groups, as defined by apartheid. There was University of Zululand for Zulu speakers and Siswati and Ndebele speakers. There was Tefluop University, which is now Limpopo University, which was for Sepedi, Setswana, Sesotho, Shivenda, and Setsonga speaking South Africans. And then Forte was for Xhosa speaking South Africans. And then you had University of the Western Cape, Bush, which was for colored students, and then University of Durban-Westville, which was for Indian students. So one of the first things then we had to do was actually to create a non-racial system of higher education at university level. The colleges were divided like that, for instance. So we had also to rebuild that system to actually have and open and truly non-racial. It's not been an easy journey, but we've made lots of progress. For instance, so far as schooling was concerned in 1994, we had 19 different education departments responsible for schooling. Because you couldn't just be transforming universities and colleges without also looking at the schooling system. From 1994, very briefly, I was deployed by the ANC to be the chairperson of the portfolio committee on education. At the time, there was no separation between basic and higher. Working with our first Minister of Education in a democratic South Africa, Professor Pengu. And we were responsible for all the foundational legislation that we have today. Started it from scratch and then created Higher Education Act. And then we had a new Schools Act. And we had also education policy framework, a new one altogether. I remember one of the big fights we had at that time was that we wanted to give the new Minister of Education central powers to be able to change policies so that we could unite all this fragmented system of education. So that's my background just before 1994, and then after 1994, I was a member of parliament. I was the first group of parliamentarians. And we laid the foundation for today's laws that have seen enormous achievements in terms of creating a better education system for all in our country.
Well, thank you very much, Comrade Blade. Thanks for that background. And I think that takes us then into the next question, which is very topical, particularly affecting many learners, because one of the key features of post-school education and the landscape and the achievements that you've spoken about is that of financial support, which the ANC-led government provides to students in the form of, amongst others, the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, or NSFAS. Are you able to remind us as to why exactly NSFAS was established, and what would you say are some of the key successes of NSFAS, Comrade Minister?
Yes. One of the things that many comrades of ours and maybe South Africans do not know is that the original NSFAS, which was called the Tertiary Education Fund for South Africa, TEFSA, was established actually under apartheid at the insistence of former President Mandela, at the time was president of the ANC. He went to de Klerk at the time, the last apartheid president, and said, I want a scheme to help poor students to be supported by government. And he went and demanded it.
Wow.
I remember he came back and reported to the NSFAS and said, I've managed to get de Klerk to agree to this, so I want poor students to be helped. Of course, we were predominantly black. Black in the broadest sense that we use it, in South Africa, everybody who is not white. So that's the origins. And the initial amount of money was just over 21 million rands, supporting about 7,000 students around 1992 when TEFSA started. This year, we have already approved money to support more than 1 million students. And we're going to hit the 50 billion rands mark, the money we are going to spend with NSFAS. NSFAS is one of the most significant achievements of the African National Congress. I always say to people, our government has got a number of grants, which of course are playing an important role in bringing relief to our people, whether it's a child grant, whether it's an old age grant, whether it's a disability grant, and so on. But NSFAS is a different grant because NSFAS changes people's lives quite radically. In fact, it's the only grant that breaks intergenerational poverty. For most South African poor families, each generation inherits poverty, nothing from the generation before, or even in a family, But NSFAS will make sure that we produce artisans now, we produce engineers, we produce medical practitioners, we produce lawyers. And those families, once they've got such qualified people, their circumstances change for good and the subsequent generations. So it's one of the most important achievements in breaking intergenerational poverty. That is why, by the way, the opposition wants to find every little fault with NSFAS, because they want to discredit NSFAS.
Exactly.
As if it's nothing that hasn't been achieved, because they know it's one of the biggest achievements of the African National Congress. Look at the DA in the Western Cape. They don't send students to study medicine in Cuba, an arrangement, by the way, by Nelson Mandela and Fidel Castro, because at the end of the day, they have no interest in tackling intergenerational poverty. And they would like to see the majority of South Africans remaining where they are and not actually changing their own situation. So NSFAS, for me, is one of the most important achievements of the African National Congress and this government. And there's proof of that. It's not that we are just talking about. Today we've got lots of professionals who were supported through their studies by NSFAS. The one other thing, by the way, that is important is that till today, the majority of students who are supported by NSFAS, they come from families where they are the first ones to see the door of a university or a college. There's been no one in the history of the family who has been to university or college. They are the first ones. So that makes a huge difference. It's something that, as a movement, we need to be proud about. And it's a story that we actually have got to tell so that our detractors, they don't try to discredit these things on all sorts of excuses that they find.
Exactly. No, thank you, Comrade Blade. And I think this is why, I think in your contribution to the debate on the President's State of the Nation address, you even mentioned that this year NSFAS will reach 50 billion rand mark in terms of funding. So this is extremely significant. Now, staying on the subject of student funding, last month also you announced the implementation of something which you referred to as the first phase of the comprehensive student funding model. Can you maybe just briefly take us through what is this and what does it seek to achieve? And how is the implementation going so far? Because people normally, the criticism that people have about the ANC is to say, no, your policies are excellent. We can vote for you on the basis of your policies, but your implementation. Could you maybe just take us through...
you can't criticize NSFAS on that score, Comrade Khalid.
Of course.
Because those who are trying to criticize, I don't mean you, those who are trying to criticize us, to say our policies are great, but we don't implement. In the case of NSFAS, it's not the case. We have a good policy and we are implementing it.
Excellent.
Quite successfully. And we've always been aware that there is still lots of improvement that we need to make. For example, we have introduced now what we call the first phase of the comprehensive student funding model, because Cabinet said, let's make sure that we pick up as many students who require assistance as possible. They are your poorest students. One thing that excites me about NSFAS is that if you are a SASSA beneficiary, you're automatically approved instantly when you apply. That's your Tinswalo that President was talking about. You have been receiving a child grant until 18. If you get accepted at a university or a college, NSFAS continues to pay for you, at least until you get your first qualification. But also we realize that there are students who fall in between the cracks a bit. Because NSFAS only pays for those students who come from families whose total family income is up to 350,000 rands per annum. If truth be told, if you are earning 400,000 rands per annum, you can't afford university education. But of course, government prioritizes the poorest and the children of the working class. So this first phase now we are expanding to say, let's assist those students who come from families who are earning just over 350,000 to 600,000 rands per annum. that at least they get a loan to study. Now, what is brilliant about this loan is that those parents will never really pay back that loan because it will be paid back by their own children when they actually graduate and they are working. In other words, they will then repay. It's a huge relief because it means now we've even increased the number of poor parents or who are not so rich, who are actually benefiting from the government scheme. Of course, it's a loan because government doesn't have all the money. As you know, by the way, the beauty of the ANC policy is very clear. We support the poorest of the poor and the working class. Social grants, it's not everybody who gets that. Housing, it's not everybody who gets what we call RDP housing. It's the poorest of the poor. And by the way, some of these schemes, you will never find them anywhere else in the world. I am not aware of any NSFAS type program in any of the developing countries, maybe with the exception of Cuba, and even in the developed countries. In places like Germany, people say there is free higher education. It's not true. They only pay for tuition. NSFAS pays for your tuition. It pays for your accommodation. It pays for food. It gives you a book allowance at the beginning of the year. And then you have got just over 300 rands monthly allowance for incidentals, You can buy some little bit of perfume. You can buy soap. You can buy a few things, That's very comprehensive support that we give. So we're extending it now by having this loan scheme, which I'm very pleased to say that already we are starting it this year, but we've got just over 30,000 applicants already who are now going to be able to study, many of them would not have because the parents would have actually battled a bit. So that's the... Now, maybe, Comrade Khalid, let me also explain comprehensively.
Yes.
Okay? You see, we have this group of the poorest working class kids which we have been supporting. So now we are saying there are those who fall through the cracks. In housing, we have the same problem, by the way. People who do not qualify for RDP housing, but also they are not earning enough to be able to get a bond.
The missing middle.
That's the missing middle which we are talking about. So the first phase of comprehensive, we are doing that. But we are saying comprehensive because the task also that we want to undertake as the ANC in government is also to bring together all the monies that government at various levels is paying to support students. Virtually all metro municipalities have got bursaries, by the way, for poor students. Other government departments have got bursaries. Provincial governments, they actually give bursaries. If you pull together all that money, you can see that government as a whole is actually spending a lot more money than NSFAS. Part of having then a comprehensive student funding model is to bring this all under one roof. Also to ensure, because at the moment it's not under one roof. One of the disadvantages, some students are double dipping.
Okay.
They get a municipal bursary and still get an NSFAS bursary. It's not supposed to be the case. You are supposed to get one bursary because the demand is actually there too. So part of this comprehensive funding must also look into that. The other matter that the ANC is looking into is student debt, because we are not happy about the fact that the student debt is very high in South Africa. It's estimated about 15, 16 billion rands. And that's not healthy because we don't want indebted students who start working there hugely. We are looking at how we deal particularly with that debt that students have been sitting with, some of them for 10 years. What do we do about that? We are also going to attend to that. Reason is one, the ANC is committed to educating, to make sure everyone is educated, irrespective of their family background. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. And I think I'm glad that you've raised the issue sharply around student debt.
Yes.
Because that often comes up in our discussions when we're doing door-to-door, when we're engaging with students at residence and including young professionals as well. So it's very important. And this, again, underscores the fact that education and quality and access to quality education for all is a cornerstone of the ANC's developmental agenda. Comrade Blade, the last two questions I want to go into is a little bit takes us away from the issue of funding, but into a topic that you are very passionate about, from our understanding, which is that of the TVET colleges.
Yeah.
You are a strong advocate for TVET college education as a viable alternative for our youth. So, as a minister, what tangible efforts have you made to ensure that TVET colleges become institutions of choice for our young people, and not just institutions, because there's a perception that the TVET college is where you are sent because you don't have an ability to go elsewhere, but to make TVET colleges institutions of choice. Can you just maybe take us through that?
I'm glad, Comrade Khalid, you are raising that, because for me, if we are to respond to youth unemployment, this high youth unemployment that we have, you have to expand the college sector, big time. Because it can't be. No country can afford to take the majority of its youth to university. No, is that necessary, by the way? It's not necessary, because you need to expand the options that young people have. Take a country like Germany. Only 30% of their school leavers go to university. 70% they get apprenticed, So because it's not everyone who is academically oriented or who wants to actually do academic. Vocational education is very important. Secondly, the reason why TVET colleges are important is because the skills that we are short of, which is what we call mid-level skills in bigger numbers, you only get them at TVET college. You don't go to university to become an electrician. You must go to a TVET college. Welders, we are short of welders. People sometimes do not believe me when I say we are short of welders. Who says, welders are everywhere. If you go to Mitchell's Plain, you will find them. They do our burglar guards, and so on. Those are self-taught, which we must assist, but we need qualified. Do you know that when we were building some of the biggest power stations, we had to import welders? People couldn't believe it, because we are talking about something that is called coded welding. Our TVET colleges, that's where we should actually be taking our students. Boiler makers, a whole lot. I'm glad to say, by the way, we've made lots of progress with our TVET colleges. When I took over TVET colleges in 2010, there were just over 100,000 students nationally. Today, there are about 500,000. Okay, we haven't grown as much as I would have liked to, but we've almost multiplied it by 4 since we actually took over the TVET colleges to be under the Department of Higher Education and Training. But also the most other important thing we did, we introduced NSFAS in TVET colleges for the first time in 2010. There was no NSFAS at TVET colleges before that. And that has really encouraged young people. I'm also pleased to say, by the way, that the attitude of parents and young people towards TVET colleges is beginning to change. One of the things that we've achieved now of late is that we are really focusing on ensuring that TVET college students also get work placement experience. Once you get that, most of them, they get employed. In fact, some of them do not even need to get employed. Today in South Africa, if you are an electrician, you don't need to get employed. You can go and start your own little business, and be able to go fixing electricity, with our challenge of load shedding. There's even more opportunities, ironically, for young people. If you are a welder, if you are a bricklayer, there's lots of construction, by the way, since 1994 that people also need to know. As a result of this ANC government, if you go to many rural areas, you see beautiful houses. Sometimes it's civil servants who work in urban areas, but they build beautiful homes, in their rural areas and so on. So there is lots of those opportunities. So those are some of the achievements that we've made. But we still need to expand the TVET college sector. I would say for the next 5 years, we should actually aim to double to over 1 million if we are to absorb, the young people who are actually unemployed. So as the ANC, we have a plan. We are implementing it.
Yes.
We just need to massify it.
Yes. No, I think and you've given good context, and it speaks directly to the issue of addressing youth unemployment. Now, related to this, Comrade Blade, you are known, and I think from the response that I would have gotten now as well, for your passion for the development of those whom we know as artisans. You spoke about welders, you've spoken about now the National Development Plan sets the target of producing 30,000 artisans per year by 2030. Now, how close are we as South Africa to meeting this particular target, and what role are our TVET colleges playing in this regard?
Yes. That's a very important target. By the way, more than anything else, artisans themselves help to grow the economy. They're not just workers.
Yes.
They help to grow the economy, artisans, by virtue of the work that they do. Some of them create jobs, as I have actually said. So the National Development Plan says by 2030 we need to, as you say, to be producing 30,000. We are around 20,000 now.
Okay.
And I'm convinced not only are we going to meet that target, we are going to surpass it. Let me tell you, already this year, I have instructed the National Skills Fund, which supports training, to say go all over the country, find any college, public or private, that is able to produce artisans. Let's work with them. Let's support them. Let's just massify artisans. You know what people do not know is that if you go to lots of industrial areas, even around Cape Town, around Stellenbosch, we have got some industrial areas, you will find that in those industrial areas, it's small and medium enterprises. If you go in there, I'm challenging you today, you will find, like Ekurhuleni. Ekurhuleni is a big industrial area, but it's small and medium enterprises. If you go in there to ask, those businesses were started by the white artisans that were trained by apartheid. Because in the past, by the way, you were not allowed by law to be an artisan if you were not white. You were prevented completely. If your employer trained you as an artisan, that employer would be arrested and possibly even lose the license for trading or for manufacturing and so on. So creating artisans is very important. The president, by the way, last year, 2022 to 2023 said, Nzimande, there are too many TVET college graduates who are sitting at home. Go and identify 10,000 of them and find them place for workplace experience. We put in 12,000. This current financial year, the president said, I want to double it, 20,000. We're already at about 15,000 already, and I'm convinced that by the end of this month, we would have met and, if not surpassed, this target that has been set by the president. And you know what that has done? Even some of the university students are beginning to say, it looks like TVET college students are able to get jobs. Maybe actually that is the route to go. And that's the kind of feedback that we are getting as a department, even through our own internal research. So producing artisans is fighting poverty, is empowering youth, is developing the economy of our country, which is what the African National Congress stands for.
Exactly. And in so doing, enhancing the transformation agenda.
Absolutely.
Certainly.
That is, skills are very central in transformation. You cannot transform a country unless you ensure access to skills, which is what my department is actually responsible for. And I just took you through a journey of how we are able to do that. I could quote a number of figures. You know, by the way, 4 years ago, for the first time in the history of our country, there were more black students studying engineering in South Africa for the first time. There was no, in our days, it's important also even to tell the story for young people. In our days, not a single black university had an engineering school. None. Because Verwoerdian ideology of apartheid, is that black people can't be engineers. you know. I mean, even our lecturers in all our universities, UWC, we called it Bush, your University of Zululand, and so on. Many of our lecturers used to tell us that, what are you doing studying economics, you know? Black people don't understand economics, don't understand engineering. You go shouting black power. You must know your black power is only good behind the spade. That is what we were told. And our lecturers would tell us, you are 150. In a class of economics 1, you are lucky if 3 of you will reach the final year. Because the system was just geared. So that we were having majority of engineering students being black in South Africa. It's an enormous, enormous change.
Oh, thank you very much, Comrade Blade. I think in your responses, you have actually taken us through the ANC's transformation agenda in this country, going even beyond what we would define narrowly as the responsibility of higher education. So thank you very much, Comrade Blade. Maybe in closing, we could ask you to give a message to the Western Cape public as we go to the polls on the 29th of May and we seek to build an inclusive Western Cape and also build on the transformation agenda at the national level. A message to the voters in the Western Cape, Comrade Blade.
A message to the voters in the Western Cape is that actually only the ANC will be able to change the conditions of ordinary people for the better. Here in the Western Cape, we know for a fact that the DA is concentrating on developing the wealthier areas, you know. They're not interested in Khayelitsha. They're not interested in Mitchell's Plain. They are actually only interested in developing areas for the rich. Do they care about education? No, the ANC cares about education. Look at the DA supporting Israel genocide in Gaza. When I tell people, they get surprised. Gaza is a population of what, 2 million? 94 professors have been killed since 2007. You don't produce a professor overnight. You don't microwave a professor. The DA actually supports that. I mean, for the leader of the DA to say it, one man's genocide is another man's freedom. Where do those people really care, you know, about these genocidal things that are happening? What are they preoccupied with? They are thinking about how the Western Cape can secede from South Africa, which also shows that they really do not care about the kind of South Africa that we want to build. Only the ANC can be able to be inclusive. We are not saying as the ANC we haven't made mistakes.
Exactly.
The old man Harry Gwala used to say, those people who say they don't make mistakes, don't go anywhere near to them because it means they are doing nothing. The only way you cannot be able to make a mistake is if you are doing nothing.
Exactly.
But if you are working, mistakes are made. Where mistakes have been made, we must own up to them and be able to say how we can correct them. And the ANC itself that actually knows that even where we've made mistakes, which we must be open about to our people, how then do we actually plan to correct those mistakes? So we call upon all the people in the Western Cape to say, for the kind of inclusive, developing Western Cape, let's vote the ANC as the only organization that understands how to build one South African nation.
On that note, thank you very much, Comrade Blade. Thank you very much for your time. And again, on behalf of the ANC in the Western Cape, thank you very much for your work that you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Amandla. Thank you.